Imagine a world where the smallest detail rewrites the course of humanity. A single fact so extraordinary, it feels almost impossible to believe, yet it's true. Tonight we journey into the past, not through dusty pages, but through jaw-dropping revelations that defy logic, ignite curiosity, and prove that history is far stranger than fiction. These are not stories of kings and battles alone, these are the mind, bending facts hidden in plain sight facts that will change the way you see the world forever. Let's begin with this. Did you know Cleopatra lived closer in time to the moon landing than to the building of the Great Pyramid? Yes, you heard that right. When we picture Cleopatra, we often imagine her as the queen of a land defined by its pyramids, those colossal tombs standing as eternal symbols of ancient Egypt. But here's where it gets unbelievable. By the time Cleopatra took the throne in 51 BC, the Great Pyramid of Giza had already been standing for over 400 years. To put that into perspective, the pyramids were already considered ancient ruins even in Cleopatra's day. Now think about this. Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon in 1969, just about 2,000 years after Cleopatra walked the earth. That means she lived almost 500 years closer to us than she did to the building of those iconic pyramids. Imagine standing in her shoes. To Cleopatra, the pyramids weren't new wonders of her civilization, they were relics, awe-inspiring monuments of a distant past, much like medieval castles are to us today, and it doesn't stop there. When tourists visit Egypt today, they look up at the pyramids and instantly think of pharaohs like Cleopatra. But in reality, she likely looked at them with the same fascination and mystery we feel. Now, they were already thousands of years old, already weathered by time, already surrounded by legends. In fact, it's very possible Cleopatra herself didn't know all the secrets behind their construction, just as modern scientists still debate the full story. This single fact completely reshapes our understanding of history's timeline. We often compress the ancient world into one long stretch, imagining Cleopatra, the pyramids, and the pharaohs of old as if they all belonged to the same moment in time. But history isn't that simple. The Great Pyramid is older than Stonehenge. It's older than the first written alphabet. It's older than almost everything we can imagine from human civilization. By the time Cleopatra ruled, the pyramid was already a monument of mystery and legend, just as it remains for us today. So next time you think of Cleopatra gazing upon those massive stones in Giza, remember this astonishing truth. She was closer to watching a rocket pierce the skies and touch the surface of the moon than she was to the men who placed those blocks one atop another to create one of the 7 wonders of the world. And that, right there, is the mind-bending reality of history. It plays tricks with time in ways we never expect. Here's where it gets unbelievable. Oxford University, one of the world's most iconic centers of learning, is actually older than the Aztec Empire. When we think of Oxford, we often picture towering spires, ancient libraries, and scholars in flowing robes debating philosophy under candlelight. But the truth is even more extraordinary. Its roots reach back to the year 1096, when teaching was already happening in Oxford, England. Over centuries, it grew into the institution that would educate kings, prime ministers, and even Nobel Prize winners. Now, place that next to the Aztec Empire, one of the most fascinating civilizations in history. The Aztec capital city, Tenochtitlan, wasn't founded until 1325, more than 200 years after students were already attending classes at Oxford. Think about that. By the time the Aztec Empire was just beginning to rise, Oxford already had professors, scholars, and a reputation as one of Europe's great centers of learning. What makes this fact so mind-bending is how we normally think about history. To most of us, the Aztecs feel like a civilization of deep antiquity, pyramids, rituals, and a society lost in the mists of time. In Oxford, that feels much more modern, like a relic of medieval Europe still standing tall today. But the timelines flip that assumption upside down. Oxford was already centuries old when the Aztecs built their empire, proving just how deceptive our sense of history can be. Picture it this way: while Aztec architects were raising massive temples in what is now Mexico City, Oxford scholars were already writing manuscripts, debating theology, and storing knowledge in libraries that still exist today, two civilizations separated by an ocean, developing in parallel. Yet one was already old when the other was just being born. And here's another layer of astonishment. When Hernán Cortés and the Spanish conquistadors arrived in the early 1500s to bring down the Aztec Empire, Oxford had already been teaching students for nearly 450 years. That means the world's oldest English-speaking university saw the entire rise and fall of the Aztec Empire, all within its own lifetime. This is what makes history so fascinating. It's not just about dates and timelines, but about the way events and civilizations overlap in ways we'd never imagine. Oxford and the Aztecs feel worlds apart, yet their timelines intersect in a way that completely reframes how we view the past. So next time you walk the streets of Oxford or read about the grand temples of Tenochtitlan, remember this astonishing truth. A seat of learning in medieval England was already shaping the future, while one of the greatest civilizations of the Americas was only just beginning to write its story. Now, brace yourself for this fact: the Eiffel Tower, the world's most visited paid monument and the beating heart of Paris, actually changes size depending on the season. Believe it or not, this iron giant, standing proudly as a symbol of romance and human engineering, can grow taller during the heat of summer. And not by an inch or two, but by as much as 15 centimeters. At first, it sounds impossible. How could a 19th century iron tower that weighs over 10,000 tons suddenly stretch itself skyward like a living, breathing thing? But the answer lies in one of the simplest scientific principles: thermal expansion. When iron heats up, its particles move faster, spread apart, and cause the structure to expand. As the summer sun beats down on the tower, its vast lattice of wrought iron absorbs the heat, making it stretch and push ever so slightly higher into the Parisian sky. When winter arrives and the chill takes over, the iron contracts, shrinking the tower back to its original height. Imagine standing on the streets of Paris on a hot July afternoon, looking up at the tower glittering against the blue sky. Without even realizing it, you're not just seeing the Eiffel Tower, you're seeing the tallest version of it. It's alive in a way, responding to the rhythms of the earth, breathing with the seasons. Gustave Eiffel, the man who designed it, may not have built it with this in mind, but his masterpiece is proof that even steel and iron are not as rigid as they seem. Now, think about what this means on a global scale. The Eiffel Tower isn't the only structure that grows and shrinks. Bridges, skyscrapers, and even highways experience the same effect. Engineers must account for this constant expansion and contraction when designing them, ensuring that these giants of human construction can move without breaking. The Eiffel Tower simply gives us the most famous, visible, and poetic example. For over 130 years, people from every corner of the world have gathered beneath its iron legs, some to propose, others to marvel, all to capture a moment of wonder. And yet very few realize they are standing under a tower that is never exactly the same height twice. The tower you see on a hot day in July is literally taller than the one tourist's photograph in January. This is what makes history's greatest creations even more fascinating. Not just the stories of why they were built, but the secrets of how they continue to live and change long after their creators are gone. The Eiffel Tower doesn't just symbolize Paris, it quietly reminds us that even the strongest things on earth are in constant motion. And finally, prepare to be amazed: sharks, those ancient predators of the deep, actually existed long before the very first trees ever grew on earth. It sounds impossible trees feel eternal, like they've always been part of our planet's landscape. Forests, woodlands, mighty oaks, and towering pines, surely they must have been here since the dawn of time. But history tells us a very different story. Sharks first appeared over 400 million years ago, during a time when the planet looked nothing like the one we know today. The oceans were teeming with bizarre marine life, and sharks, though primitive compared to the sleek hunters we see now, were already ruling the seas. Meanwhile, the land was barren, empty, and lifeless. No grass, no flowers, no trees, just rocky surfaces and small patches of mosses and algae clinging to survive. It wasn't until about 350 million years ago that trees began to take shape. Towering plants like the ancient Archaeopteryx started to spread across the land, building the first true forests and forever transforming Earth's atmosphere. But by the time trees arrived, sharks had already been swimming for tens of millions of years. They were veterans of survival before a single root had broken through the soil. Think about that for a moment when you look at a shark today, whether in an aquarium or gliding silently through the ocean. You're staring into the face of a creature older than forests, older than leaves, older than the idea of shade itself. While trees were still just an evolutionary experiment, sharks had already perfected the art of being a predator. Even more astonishing, sharks have survived 5 mass extinction events. They outlived the dinosaurs. They outlived countless other species that came and went while they continued their reign. And here they are today, still roaming the oceans, a living fossil, a direct link to a world so ancient it's almost beyond imagination. It changes how we see nature, doesn't it? We often look at forests as the great symbols of age and resilience, yet the shark has been here far longer. The great white cutting through the waves today is part of a lineage that has seen the rise of mountains, the splitting of continents, and the first tree casting its shadow on a barren earth. This single fact reminds us of the unimaginable scale of time and of the survivors who have endured it all. Before the first leaf ever fell, before the first branch reached toward the sky, sharks were already kings of their world, masters of survival in a planet still learning to breathe.